2:18 a.m. Manhattan, 1935. An upstairs room above a midtown restaurant where the curtains stayed drawn. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat in the back third of the table, suit sharp, hands open, a coffee cup untouched. A police siren cut off mid-wail outside, then returned farther away. The air carried cigar smoke and the thin scrape of a chair against wood. Two men at the door watched the hallway like it owed them money. Names moved quietly. Clubs, policy banks, truck routes. Each one a Harlem corner with a price attached. A folded newspaper lay beside a thin ledger, its headlines smudged by handling. Somewhere below, plates clinked once, then stopped, as if the building had learned to listen. The door opened without ceremony, letting in a gust of winter air and a man who treated rooms like property. Dutch Schultz came in with a pale overcoat and hard eyes, flanked by two Bronx men who kept their hands low and still. Chairs stayed seated. The table did not rise. Schultz's cuff brushed the back of a chair, and the chair moved as if pushed by authority alone. A waiter set down a plate of roast untouched by anyone, then withdrew. Bumpy Johnson remained where he was, shoulders square, gaze level, giving the room no excuse to read him as eager. Schultz looked past the ledger and the newspaper and spoke to the men around Bumpy as if Bumpy were a coat rack. "Harlem's running fat on policy," Schultz said. "That money rides my city. It's time it rides with my protection." One of the Midtown men, a go-between in a neat tie, tried to soften it. "Dutch, Harlem's got its own arrangements." Schultz smiled without warmth. Arrangements are what men with leverage call their habits. A Bronx lieutenant slid a map across the table. Bridges marked in pencil, drop points circled, cab stands underlined. He tapped a route that cut straight through Harlem. "Trucks get clipped," he said, "Vet. We stop that. We take a taste." The word taste landed like a tax. Several witnesses, bookmakers, club owners, a cautious lawyer, kept their eyes down, memorizing faces without appearing to look. Schultz finally turned toward Bumpy. The turn felt delayed on purpose, as if granting attention were part of the price. "Johnson," Schultz said, pronouncing it like a bill, "you're the colored fellow they say keeps order up there." The room tightened without movement. Bumpy's hand stayed open on the table edge. Schultz leaned in just enough for cigar smoke to drift across Bumpy's shirt front. "Here's how it works," Schultz said. "Guy, I take Harlem's routes. Your people keep collecting in back rooms if they behave. You can stay useful, or you can be replaced." A man near the door let out a small laugh, the kind meant to be heard by the right ears. Schultz caught it and fed it. "Don't mistake me," he said. "I don't need Johnson. Harlem's full of Johnsons. If this one goes sour, I buy another, expendable." The word sat in the center of the table like a match. Nobody argued. Nobody reached. A pencil stopped scratching in the ledger, suspended above ink. Schultz watched the pause and mistook it for surrender. Bumpy spoke once, evenly. "Harlem pays its own protection." Schultz's mouth twitched. "Then Harlem learns arithmetic," he said. "The city's changing. Keep up or get out of the way." Schultz waited for a flare. An insult returned, a chair shoved back, a hand sliding under a coat. He got none of it. Bumpy Johnson's face stayed composed, his voice measured, giving Schultz nothing to punish and nothing to boast about. The Midtown go-between cleared his throat. "Dutch, there's ways to do business," he said. "Harlem's not the Bronx." Schultz waved him off. "Business is business," he said, "and business is mine." He looked to Bumpy again, hunting a reaction he could carry like a trophy. Bumpy did not grant it. Bumpy's fingers rested beside the ledger, not on it. The ledger remained a witness, not a weapon. He turned his head toward the cautious lawyer seated 2 places away. "This meeting is done," Bumpy said to no announcement. No argument, just a statement delivered like a closing signature. Schultz gave a short laugh. "Done?" he repeated. "You don't call endings in my city." Bumpy looked at him without hurry. "This room does," he said. "Not you." Schultz straightened, eyes narrowing. One of his Bronx men shifted his stance to show readiness. Across the table, Smitty shifted too, then froze when Bumpy's hand lifted a fraction, palm open. The signal was small and absolute. The room obeyed it. Schultz caught the gesture and misread it as restraint forced by fear. "Smart," he said. "You know who wins this." He reached into his pocket and set a thick business card on the ledger, the kind printed for men who pretended legitimacy. A phone number sat in bold type. "Call when you decide to be reasonable," Schultz said it, "or don't call. Either way, I collect." Bumpy did not touch the card. He let it sit there like a contaminant. He spoke to the go-between, not to Schultz. "Tell your friends downtown," Bumpy said. "Harlem doesn't sign under threats." Then he gave Schultz one sentence and no more. "If you want Harlem, ask the men who keep New York orderly." Schultz smirked, amused. "I'm orderly," he said. "I pay cops, I pay judges, I pay undertakers." A few witnesses lowered their eyes at that. Bumpy's expression did not change. "Then you pay too much," he replied. The line did not rise, did not taunt, did not threaten. It simply closed the air. Schultz decided there was nothing here worth fighting over tonight. No panic, no easy dominance. He turned and walked out, his men following, their shoes loud on the stairs as if volume could replace control. When the door shut, the room held silence for one beat longer. Bumpy lifted the business card by its corner and slid it into the ashtray. He stood, adjusted his cuff, and addressed the table. "No retaliation," he said. "No street talk, no messages, only calls." He paused. "The right ones." He did not explain who those calls were for. The room understood it anyway. Smitty gathered names without asking questions. The lawyer closed his notebook. Witnesses rose in order, careful not to look relieved. Bumpy walked out last, leaving the smoke and the ledger behind like a sealed record. In the stairwell, he stopped at the wall phone, lifted the receiver, and asked the operator for a number downtown. When the connection clicked, he spoke 4 quiet words. "Tell Mr. Luciano. Now." The line went dead with a clean click. Bumpy replaced the receiver, buttoned his coat, and stepped out into the street where midtown lights made every face look borrowed. A driver waited at the curb in a dark sedan with a plain plate. No questions. The rear door opened as if on schedule. Bumpy slid in, hat low, hands still visible. The car moved without hurry, turning corners that avoided the brightest avenues. It stopped at a hotel entrance that treated secrecy as a service. Inside, an elevator rose to a floor where carpet swallowed footsteps. A guard at the hallway nodded once and opened a suite door. Lucky Luciano stood near a window with the shade half drawn, suit immaculate, cigarette held between fingers like a pen. Meyer Lansky sat at a small table with a stack of papers, the kind that never made it into court. Frank Costello leaned back in a chair, decisive, watching the door as if he expected trouble to announce itself. Luciano did not offer small talk. "Dutch is making noise," he said. "Too much noise." Bumpy set his hat on a chair and kept standing. "Noise reaches Harlem," he said. "He wants the roots. He called Harlem expendable." Lansky slid a sheet across the table. Numbers, dates, names of bars, names of policemen. "Schultz doesn't understand borders," Lansky said. He thinks he can buy them. Costello exhaled smoke. "He thinks he can buy judges and still speak like a king," he said. "That kind of man brings heat." Luciano watched Bumpy the way a man watches a bridge he plans to cross. "Harlem's yours," Luciano said. "But Harlem sits inside New York. If Dutch starts squeezing colored money, he squeezes our peace with it." Bumpy nodded once. See. "Harlem stays quiet when it's allowed to stay quiet," he said. "See, Dutch won't allow it." A clerk's file folder lay open on the table, stamped with courthouse letters. Lansky tapped it with a fingertip. "Dutch has a federal tax case hanging," he said. "He's talking about killing the prosecutor. He's telling people that in bars." The words landed heavy because they were practical. In New York, murder plans spoken aloud were not bold. They were careless. Bumpy stepped closer and pointed to the map lines Lansky had drawn. "These are Harlem drops," he said. "These are the cabs that carry cash. These are the clubs Schultz is leaning on." He did not raise his voice. He placed information like weights on a scale. Luciano's cigarette ash grew long and unshaken. "He insulted you in a room full of witnesses," Luciano said. He thinks you'll answer like a street man. Bumpy's reply stayed even. He wants a fight, he said. He gets a meeting. Costello leaned forward. The commission doesn't tolerate Dutch freelancing, he said. Not with that prosecutor talk. Lansky gathered the papers into a neat stack. We make sure the right ears hear the right words, he said. And we make sure Dutch can't buy his way out. Luciano looked toward the door, then back to Bumpy. Harlem keeps its corners calm, he said. No reprisals, no headlines, your people stay clean. Bumpy answered with a single nod. Harlem stays silent, he said. That's the leverage. Luciano lifted his glass and set it down without drinking. Then it's decided, he said. Dutch stops pushing, one way or another. The suite door closed, and the city resumed its breath. Outside, traffic hissed on wet pavement, indifferent to decisions made above it. Bumpy left the hotel the same way he entered. No entourage, no announcement. Only a driver and a route that kept him out of the brightest light. Harlem received the instruction without speeches. Policy bankers shortened their hours and tightened their circles. Runners stopped lingering on corners. Club owners stopped taking unknown meetings in back rooms. A bartender who usually kept a phone number under the register tore the paper in half and flushed it. The neighborhood became a closed system. Cash moved, but it moved through fewer hands, with fewer faces exposed. Schultz's men felt the change first as inconvenience. A Bronx collector arrived at a Harlem club and found the manager polite and unavailable then. A truck Schultz expected to escort across the bridge found no pickup waiting at the far end. The routes Schultz meant to tax stopped presenting themselves. Harlem did not challenge him. It simply refused to cooperate. Schultz responded with pressure, and the pressure exposed him. He sent envoys who talked too loudly. He threatened in rooms where threats were remembered. He leaned on policemen who took money but did not like his mouth. Each push created a witness. Each witness became a file. Downtown, Luciano's circle moved paper instead of pistols. Names and quotes traveled through quiet channels. Judges, fixers, men who sat near telephones in social clubs. The tax case was spoken about in the right places. The prosecutor's name was repeated with concern, not alarm, framed as a problem Schultz could not stop talking about. Men who had enjoyed Schultz's generosity began to treat him like a fire that might spread. In Harlem, Bumpy kept his own house disciplined. Smitty intercepted talk before it became gossip. Flash Walker redirected meetings toward neutral rooms. When a young runner suggested paying Schultz to end the nuisance, Big Walt blocked the idea with a stare. The message was consistent. Harlem would not be baited into street violence that made headlines and invited raids. Schultz began to find doors closed that used to open. A supplier who once extended credit asked for cash up front. A lawyer who once returned calls started letting the phone ring. A corrupt precinct contact began arriving late, then not at all. The isolation was not dramatic, it was administrative. A man watching his own influence turn into delay. Schultz tried to cut across the problem with one decisive act, a demand for a Harlem sit-down on his terms. The demand reached Harlem and died there, unanswered. A second demand followed, sharper. It met the same silence. The silence signaled something Schultz could not purchase: alignment. In Newark, at the Palace Chop House, Schultz sat at a table under bright light that did not flatter him. He argued with his own men, voice carrying, as if volume could restore command. When the gunmen arrived, they did not announce themselves. They walked in like employees, closed distance, and fired with professional economy. The room erupted, then settled into the kind of chaos that becomes evidence. News traveled back to Harlem as a headline, then as a confirmation. In back rooms, no one celebrated. The system simply adjusted. Routes that had been contested reopened under quiet understanding, and the city's borders returned to their preferred shape. At a Newark hospital, Dutch Schultz lay under white sheets with his face turned toward the wall. Guards posted more from habit than hope. Doctors moved with clipped urgency, then with resignation. Reporters crowded the hallway, pressing notebooks against their palms. Schultz talked to anyone within reach: detectives, nurses, strangers, words spilling without control, naming names, hinting at arrangements, trying to bargain with attention. The city listened, not out of loyalty, but to measure the damage. In Manhattan, men who claimed no titles gathered in private rooms and made the kind of decisions that never appeared in court transcripts. Phone calls went out with simple instructions. Hold the line, keep the peace, avoid the spotlight. Clubs reopened under new understandings. Trucks moved again on routes that no longer required Dutch permission. The machinery of New York returned to its preferred rhythm. Harlem reflected the outcome without fanfare. Numbers bankers reopened their ledgers. Runners returned to corners with smaller groups and stricter rules. A few ambitious outsiders tested the border and found it guarded by absence. No meetings granted, no introductions offered, no business conducted on demand. The neighborhood's silence functioned as a gate. The men who had witnessed Schultz call Bumpy Johnson expendable repeated the line in quieter tones, as if embarrassed to have heard it spoken aloud. In back rooms, the story was told without embellishment. Schultz had tried to tax Harlem by humiliation, and Harlem had answered by refusing to become noisy. The answer had traveled downtown as discipline, then returned as policy. Territory acknowledged, borders restored. Near Lenox Avenue, a club owner folded a newspaper and slid it under the counter, the headline already losing its sharpness. A waiter wiped a table that had not been used. A driver checked his watch and started the engine on time. No gun appeared. No toast was raised. The verdict lived in operations. Cash moved where it was permitted, and permission belonged to men who spoke last. Harlem's border held, and the city treated it as settled business.